Well, hello everyone. I'm Tim Colson.
Hi, and I'm Syma Khalid.
And welcome to another episode of Science of the Times. So if you're enjoying this podcast and are listening it on, whether it's on Apple or Spotify or any of the other audio providers, or even if you're watching it on our YouTube channel, please do like it if you're enjoying it and hit subscribe because that helps us. Anyway, Simon, how's your week been?
It's been good. Lots of teaching again. Not something you'd know an awful lot about, I think, Tim.
No, what is teaching?
But it's been a lot of fun. How about yourself?
Oh, it's been good, actually. I've been busy writing. I had a few meetings. It's kind of, term time's always busy, isn't it? It's always a sort of lot of stuff on. But
Today's a big night for you, though, right?
it is. This won't be going out, obviously, until after the game has happened, but it's Spurs Man U in Bilbao, final of the Europa Cup.
As for me, I don't know. I think it's a shame that both teams can't lose, to be honest. But are you confident?
I mean, Spurs have had such a disastrous season. I'm not, but Man U's hasn't been much better. Yeah. So we'll see. But I can't bring, this is the biggest night in Spurs' history for a long time. But I've got something in the diary which has been there for months, which means I have to go out. And in fact, it involves our guest, who's also a footballer who wants to watch this guest, but I'm taking him to a posh meal. So we're both probably going to have headphones in. But anyway, without further ado, should we get him on?
Yeah, let's get him on.
So, Robbie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you for having me, guys. It's my first time to Oxford. My name's Robbie Wilson. I'm a professor at the University of Queensland. I'm a trained ecologist, but now I'm doing a lot of work in the area of sports.
So tell us about how you made that transition. So you kind of, as you say, you started out as an ecologist. What were you doing? You were studying animals, weren't you, and how they move, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So to me, the work that I've done has always been a version of sports science. I describe my work as sports science in nature, and what I mean by that is that anything an animal has to do in nature, and for it to be successful, it has to do with its body. And whether it's running away from a predator, whether it's catching prey, any of the activities it does, it relies on what the individual can do with its body. And the metrics of success for an animal in nature might be reproductive success, how many babies it leaves behind. But it's identical, and I look at it identically to what happens in a sporting game. And the success of an individual sportsman or woman is down totally to what they can do with their body, the decisions that they make, and the metrics of success there are just different. They're metrics associated with how many trophies an individual can win, how much money they can attract. So to me, I don't see any great difference.
So either life's a game, or or sport is life and death. One or the other.
So, Robbie, this all sounds very, makes sense in that you say it that way. But was it designed that way, or was it just that you like biology and you like sport?
Oh, that's a cynical question, but it's so accurate. So I had two loves and two heroes growing up. The heroes were Sir David Attenborough and someone very, very similar to Sir David Attenborough, and that is Diego Maradona. So I wanted to be a zoologist, and I wanted to be a professional footballer. And one of those dreams came true. I had it all organised in my head. I was going to be a professional footballer first, and then I'd retire at about 30, and then I'd become the zoologist. But the football went aside, I became a zoologist, and then I became interested in what animals do in terms of those games and life or death decisions in nature. And so for me, it was a transition that was quite easy.
That's really got me thinking now. Have you got any sporting heroes, Tim? Like growing up, someone you looked up to?
I always loved the cricket. And Botham, probably, Ian Botham was a bit of a sporting hero of mine, fantastic cricketer and a lifestyle that I would aspire to.
I think so. Perhaps his nemesis was my sporting hero growing up. So Imran Khan, I think, for me. My two are probably Imran Khan and Martina Navratilova.
Because you actually grew up in Pakistan for your early parts of your life, didn't you?
Did I? I don't remember that. I grew up in Wolverhampton.
Did you? Okay. You can cut that bit then. I thought you said you didn't come over until maybe, well.
Let's leave it in, it's funny.
Yeah.
I loved Imran Khan, and I remember watching the Pakistan team win the World Cup in
92.
Australia. Exactly, yes. Actually, a year later, in 1993, Diego Maradona, just a segue there to my hero, came out of retirement to play for Argentina because they got destroyed by Colombia and they had to play Australia to make the World Cup. And so Diego and the team came out to Sydney, my last year of undergraduate at the University of Sydney. I found out where they were training. I broke into the training session. I jumped the fence. And being obsessed with Diego, I knew what his brother and his wife looked like. And they were there on the hill watching the Argentinian team train, and I sat down next to them. And it took about 20 minutes before the security guards realised, I don't think he looks like an Argentinian. And so I got turfed out. But I got to see him play.
What a wonderful story.
So tell us about some of the sort of scientific questions that you're addressing in football at the moment, in sports science. So what is it you're trying to find out? What is it you're trying to learn?
So I'm really focusing on two aspects, and that is talent identification and talent development. And so I look at those as quite separate. The talent identification, I'm trying to come up and invent games where I can rate the performance of individual players in a clear quantitative way and fairly compare players. Not just using my eye and thinking, I think he looks better than that one, etc. I want to develop little games that are reflective of what players have to do in the game itself, 11v11, and then assess the players in a really regimented way. And also part of that is doing individual tests itself. And so skill tests that are very good at predicting how players are actually going to go in games. So over the years, I've come up with like 30 different tests, of which I would say 20 of them have been thrown out because they didn't predict anything. If a player was good at that particular test, it didn't mean they were good in an activity that was important in a game. So those go.
So then how do you validate and test the tests?
Yeah, so the usual process is, when you do science, it's a bit intuitive at first, and you've got an idea and you give it a go. And so that would be the way, because I played football, I played football growing up, then I was aware of what it is that the good players usually have. And so, for example, great players know how to control a football, have got the time to control it well, look up, see what the best opportunity is next, and make an accurate pass. And so if I can come up with a test that can quantify that ability in an individual, and I can quantify it in a way where that an individual that's good in that test on one day is good at it another day, so it's repeatable, and that can tell us something about how well individuals do in games, then that's something that I can go with confidence. That's revealing about the quality of a player. I like the individual tests because I can roll them out. I do work all around the world, and I can roll exactly the same test out in Brazil, in Europe, in Africa, and compare them.
So the individual tests, we'll come on to those in a sec, but
Yeah.
so you're looking at what's going on in actual games.
Yeah.
So you're looking at things like ability to dribble, ability to pass, get around players, all of that sort of stuff. You talked about sort of small games, I think. Are those like rondos?
Yeah, so
I'm very impressed.
You might need to explain to our reviewers what a rondo is, yeah.
Yeah, so a rondo is a passing game used in training, and it's used to improve the ability of players to quickly control and pass a ball on. And the simplest form of a rondo, a possession game, is three players on the outside and a defender on the inside, and they're just keeping the ball. And you can have 3 versus 2, 4 versus 3, 5 versus 4. There's any number of different types of rondos you can put together.
And it's about possession.
It's specifically about possession. So I might be interested, okay, I want to quantify how good a player is at keeping the ball. And so if I then get a bunch of players in and play lots of different rondo games all at the same time and film them, then for each individual I can record how many times they get the ball, whether they successfully pass it on or not, and whether they lose it or not. And so I get a metric of possession success. And because I've got lots of games going on at the same time, then they will go for a short period of time. All the players come to a central location. I mix them up again and then distribute them. And that way, you don't get an individual that's by chance alone always playing with the best players or always playing with the worst players or always playing against the best or worst defender. So it's almost you're comparing each individual against the random. When I'm designing the individual tests, I go for the sorts of tasks that are important for every individual to do in a game. So you watch a game, any game of football, what does a player have to do? They have to control the ball when it's passed to them. They have to control it quickly and accurately. They may need to look up and see who's in a better position. And then they have to pass it accurately on to an opponent. And so every single player, no matter what the position, needs to do that technical skill really well. The further you get up the hierarchy of quality of players, the more important it is that they do that consistently, not just once every 2 times, but 99% of the time. And then another really common thing that players have to do is they need to run with the ball. They need to dribble it. And so there's different types of dribbling too. So there's the ones where a player will kick the ball well in front of them and then use their pace to run naturally and go as fast as possible. And so what's clear is that every time you touch a ball, it slows you down ever so slightly. So if you want to go as quickly from A to B, you want to kick it a few times. But some of the best dribblers in world football are those that can use the ball in tight spaces and navigate their way through. And that means taking lots of small touches and extremely accurately and often using 2 feet. And so I've got tests where they go in a real curved path and some that go directly straight. I really should have brought that sort of setup to get you guys tested on the dribbling paths.
Make us into Jeremy Doku's.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah. Isn't he fantastic
He really
to watch?
is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Robbie, we saw some of your setups in the park the other day, and I think for me it was interesting that given how popular football is and how many kids play football, that this level of detail and resolution isn't already being taken care of at the sort of grassroots level.
To be fair, I'm just as surprised as you are.
Right.
It's astounding. So I can go to any club, the elite clubs around the world, for youth academies, and I'll ask them, okay, who's the fastest? Which player's fastest in the under-16s? They'll know. Which player ran the most kilometres in a game? They'll know. Which one is best on the agility test? Which one can do the longest jump test? They all know it. And then I'll ask a very simple question to me is, okay, how accurate is that player with their left foot versus their right foot? And they have no idea. And to me, that's a fundamental part of playing football. Or how quickly can they run with the ball? A fundamental part. So it's not happening. And I think the simple reason is it's more difficult to test that. it's more difficult to have a repeatable test of these sorts of performances.
But those are key for the games, right? The actual match.
Oh, no, I agree. They are absolutely key and they should be done. However, they are more difficult than just doing a straight sprint test, or more difficult than putting a little sensor on a player's back and then downloading the data afterwards. But if they're serious about getting ahead of their opposition and getting a little advantage over their rivals, then it's the next step.
And so can your setups also help evaluate positioning in a game? I always think this is interesting. So you see a player do a great pass or a great run, and then sort of you think, well, okay, move into the space, or, what are you doing now, right? Are you ready for the return pass? Is that something you can help with?
So we do, but it's indirectly.
Right.
Okay, so an example is the passing control test I showed you guys the other day. Yes. And now with that, I can assess how good a player is at receiving the ball, whether they've got the right body shape to receive the ball, the right body shape to be able to scan and see where they're supposed to be passing it next. Whether they repeat that or do that in a game is not necessarily possible. However, some of my tests are small-sided games. So they are the closest tests I have to what you would think is closest to what happens in the 11v11 games. You have to do those sorts of movements in those games. And just like I was explaining before in the rondos, we do exactly the same in those small-sided games where we record who scores goals, who prevents goals, whether they're on teams that win by more goals or not. And if you repeat that over and over again, you get a metric from an individual about how good they are in those game-realistic matches in terms of what's their quality in terms of net goals per game. So we get a metric of match effectiveness. So if you've got a player that's maybe +2 goals per game in a 3v3 game, they're really good.
So this whole approach makes a lot of scientific sense, I think, Syma, because, you're working on a really complex, the game is the complex system, right, with all sorts of things going on, and it's hard to really work out, each bit of it, and each bit of performance of each player. And you're almost coming up with experiments, aren't you? So whether it's the rondos or at the individual level, where you're able to assess these performances and you work out which bit you can work on. So you're really taking your scientific training in a way that perhaps often hasn't happened in football before. Although I'm sure some sports scientists will say, wait a minute, Colson, what are you talking about?
I 100% agree with what you're saying there. And I think that's the real advantage from coming from the ecological sciences is when I look into nature and I'm trying to understand what makes an animal successful, I understand that it's a really complex environment. It's way more complex than a sporting environment. Yes. And so if I can break down what makes an individual animal successful in that sort of complexity, then I can do it in a sporting sense.
One of the reasons that I'm not a world-leading footballer is when I was at school, I was kind of born very late in the school year. So if I'd been a month and a day younger, I'd have been in the next school year and I'd have been old for the year. And because I was late, I was small. I wasn't as well developed as people who were earlier on in the school year. And therefore, I didn't kind of get selected to play for teams and whatever, and I never got the training. So that's why I'm no good. Is that a real thing, or am I imagining?
Well, I think you're making a valid point collectively. Whether that's why you didn't make it, I'm not sure about, and I don't have the data to comment.
But there is quite an age effect, isn't there?
Yeah, so this is, we've known about this for decades now.
Right.
And the issue is that often you'll get players that, you get sports that play in age cohorts. And so, for example, right now I was working with a team in Brazil, and I was working with the under-13 team now. So they were born in 2012. So that's the 2012 calendar year. And anyone born in that year is going to get selected into that. So the problem is, if you're born in January, you are 10% older than those individuals born in December. And that sounds like a 10% advantage, but it's way more, because that's the time in which there are these massive growth spurts in young boys. It's the same effect in young girls as well. And this advantage in growth means that there's a huge benefit for those that are larger, more physically developed, and they get to dominate those games. And when a scout comes along and watches a game, they'll go, that player's the best. Clearly that player's the best. And in a way, they're absolutely right. But that's not what a scout should be doing. A scout should be looking to see who's most likely to be successful when they all mature, not the here and the now. But just to show you what a ridiculous problem it is, across the more than 1,000 players that I have looked at in Brazil, in elite youth academies, around 60% of them were born in January, February, March.
Wow.
6% in the last 3 months of the year.
6.
It's insane.
Yep.
And no one is doing anything about it. There are attempts to deal with it, and there's a lot of work in Europe about something called biobanding, and so they will match players that are in the same sort of maturity status. However, that's done after they're selected in academies. So the filtering has already occurred. Yeah. It's a massive problem. And so obviously, being the quantitative scientist, I feel like it should be something easy to resolve, and at least to reduce in some sort of way.
Well, I mean, when you're at school and there's I went to a school where there was ability levels of banding. And when I first started school, I struggled with English, actually speaking English, because no one in my home spoke English. And I was in a low ability band, and then slowly moved my way up through. And you would have thought that perhaps similarly something could be applied in football, right? Sort of moving players around in these groups.
No, I mean, it does intuitively make sense, but the problem is that when those kids are selected at maybe as young as 10 years of age, they get the better training, the better facilities, they're training more often, and then that difference usurps the difference in physicality, and then they never get a chance.
I suppose another way, though, you could say that any team at that age has to have, a certain number of people born in each quarter of the year. So that might be another way of doing it, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Paul, I'm making it up as I go along, obviously. But.
No, I mean, I think there's the sorts of simple things that are possible to deal with the situation. It won't deal with it entirely, but I think it's a step forward.
So are there any players that you know of who were born late in the year who've met with success? There must be a few. You say 6% in the academies. Any global superstars?
Well, it's a really interesting. I'll answer that in two different ways. One is that if you're in an academy and you're born in the last 3 months of the year, then you're more likely to be a professional. So you're more likely to be successful. Now, that may be because they're picking the little geniuses that can stand above. An alternative explanation is that if you're small and got those physical disadvantages, then you're getting an amazing experience in a training academy because you're playing against bigger players. And what do you have to do? You have to be smarter here, and you have to be better with your feet.
Yes.
But I think there's a great example of someone who wasn't picked up until 18 years of age, and that is the super successful Rafinha, Brazilian, who's
Barcelona,
playing in Barcelona, had an amazing season, born mid-December, And
what academy did he come through?
He was Leeds for a while.
yeah, he played at Leeds, but he didn't have any academy because he had trials everywhere, but no one picked him up. He was smaller, and a player of his quality, worth above 75,000 euros, 5 million euros, he wasn't discovered and wasn't placed into a professional team until he was 18, playing on the streets of Porto Alegre in the south of Brazil. Incredible.
What a story. I'm still yet to be discovered.
Still time.
I can hold the laugh.
I think my footballing days might be over, so I'm holding out for cricket.
I think cricket could work for you.
Maybe we should go to our sponsors now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's take a little break, folks. Hi, Tim. You're looking particularly snazzy today. What are you wearing?
I'm wearing a piece from a company called Grace and Garbo. And actually, you know a little bit more about them than I do, to be honest.
Yeah, you're right, I do. And
You're the fashion queen. Yeah.
I'm also wearing a piece from Grace and Garbo. So this is a delightful knitwear outfit set up in Birmingham. What they do is they source knitwear, quality knitwear from all around the world. So it's vintage, one-off pieces, many of which they then hand embellish, like the one you're wearing today with its beautiful purple flowers. And so they're big on sustainability. Nothing goes to waste. Everything is sort of recycled and reused. And if you want to know more about them, then have a look at the link beneath this episode.
And thank you very much to them for supporting our podcast. I hope their sales soar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Grace and Garbo. Okay, folks, so welcome back. Okay, Robbie, now we're going to really put you on the spotlight. So, can you tell us, how do you evaluate that your methods, your tests work?
Yeah, that's a great question, a complex question, because when I'm dealing with young players, then you've got to see how they develop over time, and that's the true test. But yeah, I've got stories, and there's a great one where I was working in the north of Brazil, and it's with the football club, Bahia Football Club, and they are now part of the Manchester City group. And I was there in early 2020, before COVID, and worked with their youth academy. So these were under 12 and under 13s players, and worked closely with their technical director up there, Daniel. And what we were able to do, and the whole point of that trip, was to develop a method of quantifying individual success from a team game, small-sided games. And so the small-sided games, they're the closest ones we get to the largest. They've got everything that is fundamentally part of a game of football.
I'm starting to wonder, this is a long-winded answer. I don't want our listeners to forget the question, which is proof of success. Come on.
Okay, so we were developing this method and we worked with under 12s and under 13s, and we had 40 players. We spent 3 days with them. We did all sorts of tests, and then we ranked the best to worst in these small-sided games. Number one was a young player, an under 12 player, Juan Pablo, okay, and he, since then, under 12 then, near the end of last year, he was the youngest ever player to play first team for Bahia Football Club, and also the youngest ever player to score a goal in the first team, and now been training with the Manchester City Football Club.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's why I'm back working with that team in the north of Brazil now. They are no longer with the Bahia Football Club. But I'm working there because they saw what my method can pick up, the fact that we can rate the players, the fact that there's a player much younger than the whole cohort we were dealing with, but stood out and then continued to stand out.
No, I mean, that's a bit anecdotal though, right? I mean, that's one case. I mean, have you got a...
We think the same. Like, we're scientists, and it's an anecdote. But, they're pretty powerful anecdotes when you are doing this, and I'm traveling around going to different football academies, assessing them, lucky enough to work with these amazing clubs and amazing academies, assessing these players, and time again, the top 2 or 3 in our tests are the ones that go through. Kai Elias, I worked with Fluminense, one of the big clubs in Rio. I worked with them a couple of years ago. He was one of our top performers in all our tests from the under-17 cohort. He's now playing at Shakhtar Donetsk, 17 million euros he was sold for.
And I guess some of it, to an extent, is also outside of your control, right? You pick out the ones who have the potential, who seem to be, and then what happens after you leave, that you have no control over. Right?
Yeah. Yes. No. Totally. And a fair criticism of the sorts of tests we do is we're testing the players in the now, and we're not really looking at their resilience, because if you're a football player and you want to make the top, you're going to have setbacks, and the sorts of things that we are quantifying is nothing to do with that. And so we might be able to say they look good given our tests. Whether they keep on coming back from those sorts of tests that are inevitable, it's hard to tell. Yeah.
But so how would your methods kind of link in with what traditional scouts do, for example? So are you able to test a much larger number of people than they would be able to look at quickly and say, why don't you look at this subset?
So the aim has always been, how can I help scouts?
Right. Okay.
And I don't want to.
So you don't want to become a scout?
No, absolutely not. And because I totally respect how they look and assess players, but they have a ridiculously difficult job. You look at the magnitude of Brazil. It is enormous. Is it possible for a scout to be everywhere? No, it's not. Is it possible that so many young kids that are growing up in favelas are getting missed purely because they are not there on the field when a scout's there? Absolutely. And so, and the other side of it is the age effect that we talked about. So how can I develop a method that essentially can help the scouts out? So instead of the scouts traveling thousands of kilometers, I could bring a small cohort of players and pop them in front of the scouts. That would be the aim.
And you found that small cohort by testing very large numbers of players.
Yeah. So I'm thinking on the magnitude of 10,000 players.
Wow.
So in order to do that, you need to think about how to structure the tests, which is why I put together tests like the individual tests of dribbling and passing control, because I can do those rapidly. I can get through thousands of players in a day, and then I can start to filter those. And then the next day, we can do the more complex tests that might be something like a rondo or might be something like a one-on-one. Again, pretty fast to do. I can filter through and then get to the more complex games, and they will be the small-sided games, say 3-on-3. And then we're getting closer to what the actual game is. And then at that stage, I would want to filter again and then present those in front of the scouts.
So in my field, I think this is called enhanced sampling.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. Because you don't have time to watch 10,000 individuals play a game of football. So how do we sample around that? Yeah.
So the sports science world must be pretty excited by this.
I wouldn't go that far.
You're starting to get some traction. You're working with some big clubs.
I'm working with really big clubs. Whether they are going to adopt these methods or not, it's hard to say. It is the future, I've no doubt, and the clubs will adopt it eventually. But it's conservative in the world of sports and football, and I'm pushing up against the tradition of scouts, and which is why I say I really want to work in with the scouts, and enhance their skills. But no, I haven't had much traction at all, which is...
Well, now that you've been on Science of the Times, the traction, I think, for sure will come.
I'm hoping so. Yes.
And so what next? What's the next steps?
So the next steps are I'm developing partnerships in Brazil right now, where I'm wanting to at least have a trial where we roll out testing for a couple of thousand players, invite them in the remote parts of northern Brazil, and give that a go, and then see what talent we can bring back to an academy. But apart from that, as you know, the science that we do evolves, and all I'm thinking about constantly is how I can make what I do better. I know I've got a product right now that will enhance clubs' ability to find players more efficiently, but I'm never going to be satisfied. I want to be 3 steps ahead of past me.
Well, hopefully, when you roll all this out and you come back, you'll come back on the podcast and tell us how it all went.
Yeah. Oh, I will be here. No doubt.
Well, thanks very much, Robbie. Yeah. That's great that you spared the time to talk to us. And I think it's fascinating that the scientific approaches we use every day, can be applied to sports in this way. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm terribly excited about it. I love it. And I spend so much time in Brazil, and what's to hate about that? It's an amazing place to visit, and I love it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for putting up with us in the park.
Oh, no. Too much fun.
Well, folks, so if you want to see Tim and I at our footballing best, then if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you're going to have to head over to YouTube. And while you're there, why not hit subscribe too, so you don't miss out on future episodes?
Well, so I thought that was really interesting. I don't know about you.
Yeah, me too. And I guess both of us are keen football fans. We're both scientists. So it ticked both of those boxes for us. And to see the two working together was amazing.
And I think it's really interesting that, how Robbie has started his career in biology and has been able to actually take what he learned in the field and take it over to his other love, football.
Yeah, he's living the dream, isn't he? Yeah. He's using the scientific method with the sport he loves and heading over to wonderful Brazil.
But were there any bits of it you were a bit sceptical about or not?
I think time will tell on how many talented or young talent is exposed this way, I think. And that's with any kind of scientific method.
No, I did sit down with him and he showed me some data. And obviously there's noise around the data, but it looked really promising. So, but I think the challenge he has, as he said, is working against a fairly conservative, old-fashioned system where they think they know best. And, neither of us have come across anything like that working in Oxford.
Academia, or specifically Oxford, not at all.
Well, anyway, that was great fun. And then, once again, a reminder to our listeners, if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe, please like, and please spread the word. And we'll see you next week. And if I'm not here, it's because I've been signed up by Barcelona.
Tim will be here next week, folks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Good night.